Now, let's continue the conversation on leveling up leadership with our next guest, Alan Mikolaj. Alan is an ICF certified coach focused on purpose driven leadership. He helps people understand their leadership styles and core values to create lasting impact. Alan, welcome to the show.
Ryan, thank you so much. I just want to first say congratulations on your premiere, and what an honor it is to be here with you today on this first show for The Bottom Line. I know you're going to be making an impact with people for quite a while, transforming lives. It's truly an honor. Congratulations, Ryan.
Thank you very much. And it's such a pleasure to have you here because I definitely value your understanding, your experience, and your knowledge. So I'm going to ask you such a big question when it comes to leadership development. And this is something that can take years to unpack for so many people, but I think you're so great at explaining this. What's the role of self-awareness in effective leadership?
When you sent me the pre-show email with that possibility of that being one of the questions, I at first was not self-aware, and and sort of went, well, I've been teaching leaders about purpose-driven leadership and life mission and leadership philosophy statements and a whole host of other range of topics. And so I just thought, oh, I'll be able to answer that on a whim. And so I started thinking a little bit about that, and reflecting on it. And I realized, Ryan, that it was really difficult to pin down exactly what we mean by self-awareness. And so, I mean, like a lot of people, we've heard of things like mindfulness and meditation and contemplation and reflecting on your purpose and core values and that sort of thing. But it was really, really difficult for me to start nailing down exactly what I was going to tell you. And so what I ended up doing is something that I do whenever I get stuck like that. And that's I turn to the literature. And so I turned and did a Google search under Scholar, and looked for studies and started trying to peruse through what was meaningful and seemed to resonate. And I landed on two studies. The first one was a study by Tasha Urich, and it was published in HBR in 2018. And this, it was really amazing about the study was that it was so comprehensive. They surveyed like over 5,000 people. They went through 800 different studies on mindfulness and self-awareness. And then they narrowed down through a pretty rigorous process 50 people that they could interview. And so I was impressed with the volume of people and what they had done. And the most amazing thing about it was, at first glance, was this cognitive bias that we have, that it was something like almost everyone that they asked, are you self-aware or above average in your self-awareness? And they're like, oh yeah, sort of like I probably would have answered if you were to ask me something like that. But when they analyzed their data, it was only somewhere between 10 and 15% of people who actually were self-aware.
Wow.
And that's a common bias. I mean, we've known about this in psychology for years and years. I mean, the first one I remember when I was studying with my master's at Sam Houston State University, was around driving. And, when you ask people, are you an above average driver? Everybody's like, yeah, something like
yeah. Everyone wants to jump on board and say they're the best at it, or they're that top level of it, right? That confirmation bias. Yep. So how does that tie into? How does that self-awareness tie into effective leadership? What makes that difference? How does that really impact a leader when they are self-aware?
Well, and that's what, that great question, it gets us to start thinking about what does it mean to be self-aware. And surprisingly to me, how some of the programs that I offer aligned with their findings without me even being able to articulate it in the rubric of self-awareness. And so, kudos to you. An example of why you're going to be such a great host is you have such great questions. And so what Tasha and her colleagues found was that there are two forms of self-awareness under the rubric that they studied, and that is an internal self-awareness and an
Mm.
external self-awareness. And the internal self-awareness was what I think most of us probably kind of think about. It's that I know my core values, I know my passions, I might have a good idea about my strengths and my weaknesses, and maybe a little bit about how I interact with others. And so that was their understanding and finding. And I think most of us could sort of intuitively just say, yeah, that's what self-awareness is. But what was interesting was that they also found that there's this external self-awareness, and that's an understanding of how others see us in the with those same sort of elements. So is my self-awareness of my values, my passions, my strengths, how I fit with the environment, how others react to me, does are others seeing that as well? And that was actually how they teased out to find their 50 people to interview, was that when they did the survey, you not only took the survey for yourself, but somebody who was close to you had to take the survey
Mm.
about you. And if that aligned, if that aligned between the person or the external and the internal, then that was one of the criteria that they used to define somebody as being self-aware.
That is really interesting when you think about it. I like the aspect of this study being done to where someone takes the survey and then someone close to them takes it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you a different perspective where two perspectives really come together to express that external awareness. And I would agree with you. I would say my first thought process when it comes to self-awareness is that internal self-awareness, not so much that external.
Mm-hmm.
And I think based on my experience, the best leaders have a really, really strong external awareness. They're able to see what their influence, what their ideas, what their efforts, what their disciplines, what all of their decisions do to the people around them so that they can continuously learn, grow, and make positive impacts. What would you say your experiences with individuals that have actually achieved both? How do you identify that? Whether someone is either heavy on one side of that scale, either really self aware or really externally self aware, where does that fall? And do you know people that are able to achieve both at the same time, becoming kind of this completely aware individual?
All right. Did you read the study?
Right.
Because your question aligns exactly with what they found. And that is that the two different types of self-awareness, that internally self-aware of who I am, what I believe, what I value, and the external awareness of how I fit into the environment and how others react to me, completely and totally separate. Just because you are strong in one type does not necessarily equate to you being strong in the other. And so uh, what that means is that we have to nurture both. And so, we have to first take that time, block that time initially to discover who we are, to be able to identify that, to clarify that for ourselves, and then to be able to articulate that. Where a lot of people say, find your voice. Well, that finding your voice starts with finding yourself, and so uh, what she found in the study, and in my experience, is that people who are more internally self-aware, they tend to have higher job satisfaction, stronger relationships. They seem more satisfied with life, and so that internal is important, but not at the detriment to external self-awareness, and especially for leaders. You're right. So leaders who can uh, have an awareness of how others are reacting to me, and are they hearing that voice? Am I consistent in, and am I can I talk the talk, and can I walk the walk? Right.
Mm. I really like how you put that. I find that really valuable because it's one thing to look a certain way, sound a certain way, but it's a completely different aspect when you can actually take action on something that follows with what you said, right? That also ties into a certain level of integrity. And as a leader, your integrity is everything. Your ability to lead others, to have influence that can make an impact, is based on your integrity. So I would definitely agree that this study makes a lot of sense, and it can definitely open up a lot of insight, especially with how you've presented this and talked about it. It makes me question my own understanding of self-awareness. Am I
Mhm.
more of an internal self-aware individual or external awareness? It raises a lot of interesting points on where we as leaders can improve and how our work on ourself can improve our ability to lead others. This is fantastic insight, and I'm truly enjoying this conversation. Where would you say you've had big moves in helping others identify their type of awareness?
Well, when I was with Common Spirit Health, it's one of the largest nonprofit health systems in the United States, if not the largest. I ran a high potential leadership development program there, and the cornerstone workshop that started came from uh, Bill Koussis and Barry Posner and their leadership challenge, and they have a really strong mini part of that workshop that's where it starts, is helping leaders to identify and clarify their core values and their leadership philosophy.
That's
And
powerful.
yeah,
That's really
yeah, and
powerful.
and it was that work that then drove me to develop a more full and rich purpose-driven leadership development program myself, because that's their segment in that workshop is it's just a small segment of it. And so
Yep.
it got, having had a life mission since 1987, I
I'm going to jump in right there. We will
okay.
be right back to continue this incredible conversation, and stay with us for the next section.